Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Gia. I am a 28-year-old lady who has moved out of her mom's basement. I guess I need a new intro because I've moved out. Anyways, yes, it has been 2 months since my last upload. I know, I'm sorry. I've mostly just been adjusting to my new environment and my new job, and I was a little embarrassed because my background was, in my opinion, ugly, but I also really enjoyed the background in the basement that I had where you could see all my books and stuff. My bookshelf is back there behind all those boxes. I don't have any room to put them right here in this setup, so hopefully I will figure out something that looks a bit more pleasing to the eye. But it has been 2 months since I last talked to you, and the video that I would have posted after the reading challenge that I did would have been the July and August wrap-up, which I didn't get around to doing because for obvious reasons. So instead of splitting up the bi-monthly wrap-ups into 2 videos, I'm just going to give you a quad monthly wrap-up right now, and I'm going to do 4 months of books right now that I'm going to talk to you about. And before anybody asks, which I know no one's going to unless you're in my life personally, no, none of the books that I have finished in the last 4 months are any of the books that I had said I was going to read in the reading challenge, which would have been in the last 2 months, but regardless, I have not gotten around to finishing them. I've been reading mostly audiobooks and ebooks. However, I do intend to get around to them at some point. I have 15 more books to read before the end of this year if I want to reach my goal of 50. And I'm starting to speed up. I'm reading a little bit more recently now that I'm settling down and I'm getting into a routine. Anyways, the first book that I wanted to talk about was kind of a disappointment. It was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I really wanted to like this book. Unfortunately, it just got annoying, and sometimes my limit for what I find to be what others would deem as pretentious or whimsical or kind of like introspective and exploratory, I have a threshold for things like that. So Hamnet follows more closely, it follows Shakespeare's wife, and it dives more into her inner monologue as going from the girl next door to being the beloved and then the wife of the poet and then the playwright. And Shakespeare himself is never specifically named here. He is only ever called the poet or the playwright, but still you know exactly who it's talking about. And the name Hamnet, he was the twin son of William Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway. His twin was named Judith, and they were the two youngest children that Anne and Will had together. They had an elder daughter named Susanna. It's going to be difficult for me to talk about this book without spoiling it. So if you really don't want to be spoiled by this, I would just skip this entirely. I'd say probably my largest issue with this book is that the character of Anne is kind of twisted into this witchy, whimsical, enigmatic woman who for some reason can tell the future as if she's being spoken to by women in the future. Throughout the entirety of the beginning of the book, Anne is extremely nervous because for some reason she's always known she was different and she knows that she's been touched, but this is very not talked about at all. This is not touched on at all. Just the fact that she just kind of knows things. I'm extremely annoyed by these extremely vague descriptions of historical women. Anne was not her own person so much as she was a collection of modern thoughts deposited onto a woman from 600 years ago. So throughout the beginning part of this book, Anne is kind of whispered in the wind that she will have twins, but only one of them will survive. And she cyclically talks about this, that she just knows that she's going to lose one. And when Judith comes down with the plague, she is concerned that she will lose Judith, but for some reason it was whispered to her in the wind that she would actually lose Hamnet. So she was terrified to lose Hamnet and then was relieved when Judith got sick instead, which I can understand how that touches on that kind of maternal guilt. Mothers who either openly favor or internally favor one child, and that maternal guilt you might feel from like being relieved that your favorite child survived. Somehow, and this also annoyed me, this was crazy to me, is that there was a scene in the book where Hamnet lays down with Judith, who has come down with the plague, and Hamnet like wishes on a wishing star that you take me instead, that my sister survives. Somehow, some way, the plague deposits itself from Judith into Hamnet, and Hamnet is the one who dies 2 weeks later. After Judith has miraculously survived. Brushing myself up on a little bit of history. So it's unclear how Hamnet died, but it is not recorded that Judith had the plague. So granted, this was at a time, as I'm reading this was granted at a time when in England about a third of all children died before the age of 10, and Hamnet died when he was 11 years old. It would have been not impossible for one of their children not to reach adulthood. 2 out of the 3 of them did. The other 2 daughters did survive into adulthood. So it's not really clear how Hamnet died, but it seems that historians believe it's either a famine or a plague that happened in the countryside at that time. It tells you where he was buried, that he was buried at the Church of Holy Trinity in Stratford in August 1596, and it is likely that his father did not even know that he died. But what frustrated the fuck out of me was this insistence on Maggie O'Farrell placing this like whimsy on a tale that's supposed to be taking place in the past. And I can, of course, understand why this works for some people, which of course is being made into a movie now. Yeah, it's going to be made into a movie. So I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. I might watch it and feel differently. It's kind of the opposite feeling of, as a woman now, you are a culmination of all the women who came before you. It's instead this commentary on you are what will become of the women after you. I rated it 3 stars simply because I was frustrated. This made me feel almost similarly to how I felt about Babylonia, which I said I would do a singular review about, and I never got around to it. But Babylonia pissed me off so fucking much because every single sentence you had fucking, what's her name? Semiramis literally talking about how she was always meant for greatness and that she would always reach greatness because of some like future blah, blah, blah. And then there was always these like future prophecies where she was like, I will reach the pinnacle of this prophecy. And I was just like, girl, the act and pipeline of using prophecy into self-fulfillment when the point of prophecy is that it's not meant to necessarily guide you. It's more to be like, I don't know. I kind of enjoy it more when a prophecy is something that looms over your head and you don't know the answer and you don't know what's going to happen. And then at the end, you look back and you realize that there were always going to be events that are out of your control. But Babylonia pissed me the fuck off because Semiramis was just like, I'm going to live this prophecy to a fucking T, as if the entirety of the world, the future, and events around her were contingent on her following this prophecy, when that's not always the case. So anyway, I don't want to talk about Babylonia again. It's going to piss me off. Anyway, maybe seeing Paul Mescal as William Shakespeare will fix me. I don't know, fix my opinion on Hamnet. I don't know, I doubt it. Next, I read A Botanist's Guide to Rituals and Revenge, and I'm kind of tired. Like, I hate to say this, but I'm a little bit tired. The first 2 books in this series were so good, and I loved them so much, but the last 2 I've just been kind of like, whatever. They're just, they're entertaining, and I'll give them that. And I do see reading value in this series because they are like quirky and fun, and I enjoy the way that Kate Kavari is using kind of, I don't want to say STEMinist, but it's kind of using the social sciences and humanities and also like the early hard sciences to solve mysteries. I think that that's fun. It's a fun little time. It kind of did something that I found similarly in the London Seance Society, where I was annoyed. I was annoyed for a different reason with the London Seance Society, but really at the crux of it, there is a fake medium that is using parents and loved ones' grief as a way to make money by sort of pretending that they could commune with ghosts, weaponizing other people's grief by pretending that they're in touch with their loved ones and can either like provide something, whether that be closure or, something. Basically, it's just, it's taking advantage of people at their lowest. And this is something that does have historical precedent. This is something that happened, the spiritualism era, where people were like really into the fact that they could commune with the dead. And of course there were going to be fakes. So the longer I've been reading, the more I've been finding this as a trope of someone pretending to be a medium. I mean, you even saw it in Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. That was also an instance where someone was pretending to commune with the dead. But In this case, we had another instance of that where they were trying to expose, and Saffron's family is kind of under siege by this guy who is posing as a doctor, but he has earned her grandfather's trust. And at the very end, I do believe the main bad guy does get away, but at the end of the book, they talk about how the next adventure that Saffron and Alexander are going to go on is an archaeological dig, which of course I was like, fine, okay, you got me. Like, I'll read the 5th book. I was going to anyway. I think it's going to be the last one in the series. But like I said, I do see rereading value in these because I think that they're fun. I rated it a 3.25, but perhaps upon rereading it someday I might change my mind. Anyway, the next 2 books were absolute fucking bangers. I finally got around to reading Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and this was a 5-star read for me. I will tell you straight out the gate, and I will tell you a couple of reasons why. The fact that Iris and Roman get together in the first book, say I love you in the first book, get married in the first book, I was like, oh, take all my money, take all my time. Because I have to tell you how exhausting it is reading books that, if they don't have multiple books in a series, they might have only 2 or 3. But I can't tell you how exhausting it is when a main couple is like, I love you, but we can't be together. I love you, but it's not the right time. I love you, but we have to save the world. And that does work in the majority of stories, depending on context, but it is extremely exhausting. As a yearner, sometimes you're tired of yearning and you just want people to love and succeed. So having Roman and Iris get together in the first book was extremely refreshing. That whole academic, not even academic, that workplace rivals to lovers. Like, you guys just need to be locked in a room together for about 5 minutes. I found Iris's character to be particularly compelling, how she gives up on her job and her dream to become a reporter for the Oath Gazette, and then she goes to become a war correspondent in order to find her brother. And then when Roman followed her immediately after, I was like, girl, how can you not realize, like, immediately that this man is in love with you and doesn't want to let you out of his sight? So at first I was just like, girl, come on, open your eyes a little bit. I think Divine Rivals in and of itself is pretty much a perfect book. I don't think there's anything I would really change about it. Really, how I decide how I fully rate a book 5 stars or not is if I think to myself at the very end, is there absolutely anything that I would do to change anything about this book? Is there anything I would have added, anything I would have subtracted? Was there anything that particularly annoyed me? And if those answers are overwhelmingly no, then that is a 5-star read, because a 5-star read is either perfect, changes my brain chemistry in some way, somehow, or it's just for some reason stands out against the rest of the pack. That's why I might rate something a 4.5 or a 4.75, because I might have had a super great time and I wouldn't change anything about the book, but it hasn't moved me. It hasn't changed me in some way. And I believe that Divine Rivals is probably one of my favorite romances I've read, either this year or just in general. I think it is probably going to stand the test of time. I disagree with that notion about Ruthless Vows, because while I understood why we were there, I was kind of annoyed with why we were there. First and foremost, it is about 3 hours longer than Divine Rivals, and I wasn't exactly sure why. I think that it really could have served to be shorter. The main plot being that Roman has been kidnapped and he's being weaponized against Iris, and he's kind of writing for the enemy, and it's a commentary on like propaganda and how writers and journalists are used as weapons toward the common people to write propaganda. However, while that was good and compelling, I found Forrest to be so fucking annoying. Forrest is Iris's brother that she went to go find in the first place. Forrest was so goddamn annoying that he annoyed me every time he was on the page, and I legitimately lowered my star rating of the book. Other than that, the plot was okay, because we're kind of like getting Roman and Iris kind of back together because they've been separated and Roman is traumatized. But Forrest could have died in chapter 1 and the book would have been better for it. The next book I read was Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake. This was a 5-star read. Dare I say, potentially a 6-star read for me. I think this is my favorite book that Olivia Blake has ever written, and I really loved the Atlas 6. Granted, I loved the first Atlas 6. The other two, well, the second one was okay. The third one, I don't want to talk about it. Anyways, Gifted and Talented follows these 3 adult children in the aftermath of their dad's death. This is also mildly magical the way that all Olivia Blake books are. She loves to put in her own little spin on like magic systems in here. Most of the time it's pretty subtle, but really just to like elevate the world building around it. Now, the father figure in question, in my opinion, would compare him to a combination of, say, Bill Gates and Elon Musk, not in terms of character, but in terms of things that they've done and things that they've created and how much money they're worth. Is more, I would combine their two essences instead of their identities. So this father figure died, and he had a personal will and then a different will. So the entirety of this story takes place within like the month after his death, after the lawyers are duking it out privately over which version of the will is real. So the 3 adult children in question don't know what the will entails or what either entailed, period. And they're all 3 going through this process of grieving their father for who he is and was, and their position in his mind and in his love. So you had like the eldest daughter that has eldest daughter syndrome, like you would not fucking imagine. Like she is extremely successful in her own right, but she always felt like she couldn't live up to her dad's image because he was constantly talking down to her and was constantly expecting more from her. She has her own issues with imposter syndrome despite being successful in her own right, even if that success wasn't entirely earned. She was kind of positioned to be her father's heir, and she's really grappling with that, whether or not she actually deserves it and can actually live up to it, because the way that other people view her externally and the way that her father viewed her and the way she views herself are 3 very conflicting people. And I myself can relate to that. The middle son is a congressman. He was successful enough to get elected, but he is not successful as a politician because he's getting stonewalled all the way around. And I found it to be kind of a commentary on how when progressive politicians start running, they are always positioned as like the rising star or the one that's going to save us. And then they get into office, and there's a lot of things that you can't really control in that kind of environment, where you can't really control all the bills that come into the House or come into the Senate. And you can't really oftentimes do everything that you promised to do. But if you can't live up to that, the voters won't vote you back in. So it's this kind of like push and pull between, I want to get this accomplished for my constituents, but if it's impossible to happen in those however many years that you're in office due to maybe external factors that you couldn't control, like a war or something, I don't know, but it's still, it kind of like goes hand in hand with the level of distrust that people have with their congressman. So he's also going through imposter syndrome, where he was like, again, good enough to get elected, but now they're criticizing everything that he does now that he has been elected. And so he's probably going to lose re-election. And this guy's just crashing and burning and having the most like insane crash out. Anyway, 3rd daughter is daddy's little favorite, and she herself has her own problems. But basically, this is just 3 adult children grieving their father who has just died, and he was kind of an asshole and kind of a piece of shit, but he has this massive empire that one of them is going to have to pick up the mantle and control, lest it go to charity. I almost said therapy. Lest it go to charity, which is where it was going to go if they couldn't like reach a consensus over what to do with all of his wealth. And yeah, a lot of what was discussed here, I felt in my own grief for my own dad when he died. Anyways, moving on. Next book I read was A Theory in Dreaming, which was the sequel to A Study in Drowning. I rated this 3 stars simply because I don't know why we were here. I was enjoying the fact that we got to see more of Effie and Preston. I think this book could have been saved by one singular thing, and I will, explain it in spoilers, but a lot of this book is following the publication process of what Effie and Preston accomplished in the first book, and the more instances of institutional sexism that Effie is encountering, and the aftermath of what happened to her in the beginning of book 1, being taken advantage of by her advisor and kind of returning to that academic space. That whole like, just because you found something incredible doesn't always change people's opinion of you, even if those opinions are sexist and misogynist. And Preston is just desperate to protect her because they've kind of left their little bubble. This is the thing. This is the thing that really could have changed this book for me, and how this book could have gone from 3 stars to 5 stars with just this simple change. In the entirety of this book, Preston is having dreams, Ethereal dreaming. They're very mysterious and whimsical, and he doesn't really understand what's happening, and sometimes he's in these like trance-like state. You're not really sure what's going on with him, like whether this is like a magical instance or if this is a mental health issue, but he is so desperate to keep Effie safe in the meantime and as everything else is going on, but he himself is like struggling with these quiet demons inside his head that you're, again, not sure if this is mental health related or if it's magical in any way. But I believed personally that this was all going to come full circle again to, at the very end of the book, that the cycle would begin anew and Preston would become the new fairy king. And the reason why I believe that is because in book 1, they killed the fairy king and they, pushed forward with their research and pushed forward with their whole process. But the aftermath of such an act, where does that magic go? And if you're wanting to explore how magic is created and ended, you also want to explore cycles of reincarnation of magic, or is it similar to energy that magic is neither created nor destroyed, but where did that magic go? Did that magic then get deposited onto Preston and Effie, and then this magic haunts Preston in his dreams until he becomes the new fairy king, that this magic has taken a hold of him and will evolve him into something else? And that didn't happen. And I'm so mad, actually, about it. It actually, I think, pissed me off a little bit. If it had gone like that, it would have been very possible for that book to become another 5-star read for me. If it had really dove into if magic is cyclical and whether it is always changing and is neither created nor destroyed. 3 stars for Ethereal Dreaming, Ava Reed. I'm so sorry. Next one I read was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Plain and simple, it was fun, and unironically, it probably has the best sex scenes I've read all year. I rated it 4.75. This was kind of the first contemporary I read in a while. I know I do that bit where I say, do I like the man in question? And yes, in this case, I did like him. I did not like Lucas as much as I like Jack from Love Theoretically, but that is why Love Theoretically is a 5-star and Deep End is a 4.75. Next, I finally finished my reread of Between Despair and Hope by Jess Wisecup. This is an 816-page book. I kept my old rating of this book at a 4.25. My criticisms are still 2 of the same. This book is way too fucking long, no matter how much of an enjoyment it is. And 2, it genuinely does feel like 2 books in one. That kind of lends badly to the fact that the book is so long, because in your mind, you're like, this could have been separated into 2 books, or even just a book and a novella. Like if this was separated into, say, a 600-page book and a 200-page novella or something like that, 550 pages in a 250-page novella. But I really think that Lavinia, who is the king's sister, she is off on her little side quest for the entirety of the book, and it really has very little to do with the main story, and that's why I think it bugged me so much, is because I was sitting here thinking there really is like very little lines of continuity between the main story and Lavinia's side quests. So I think this could have been a main book and a novella. That's just my personal opinion. But now I get to finally read the last book in the series. Just to give everybody a status update, we have entered the month of October, in which I read The Wild Huntress by Emily Lloyd Jones. I did not know until after I had picked this book up and had it on my library holds for a long time that this is actually in the same universe as The Bone Houses. I was told that you did not have to read The Bone Houses before you read The Wild Huntress, and normally I do not believe publishers or fans when they say that you don't have to read The Bone Houses before you read The Wild Huntress. They're in the same universe, but they are considered standalones. I hardly ever believe that. Unfortunately, this rang true, and it probably affected my enjoyment of the book. I really should have put the book down and chose to read The Bone Houses first, because I truly was confused, and that probably led to the fact that I rated this book a 2.75, because there was gaps in my knowledge about this universe that I just didn't know. So a lot of it didn't make sense to me. I think that this book is trying to kind of ride that line that the Infernal Devices wrote in the Bible. 3 people in a narrative, they're all kind of in this like weird love triangle, but are they kind of sort of? Because it centers on 3 people. It's like, yes, you can reasonably believe that Bronwyn could be with Gudjon or Pryderi, that you believe that this is in the realm of possibility, but you also know who she's probably meant to end up with in the end. In the end, this book does come off more as a tragedy instead of a happy ending, so I will warn you there. I did read a book about 2 years ago that was a tragedy, but I appreciated the way it was written, because it was written as though the main character was a mythical figure that was a person that legends were written about, and you were experiencing their story. So their story didn't end in a happy ending, but their story became legend and myth to the people who came after. So I really appreciated that process, and it was Empress of All Seasons by Emiko Jean. I felt as though The Wild Huntress was trying to follow this same path, as though not that it was trying to write that Bronwyn was going to be this like mythical person or this legendary figure that people were going to talk about for years and decades to come. Like, it was sad, yes, but it also didn't have the same finality that Empress of All Seasons did, where it very much comes to a point where you're like, this is the end of the book. This is it. This book ends and you feel as though the next one is beginning. And I wasn't sure if that was entirely earned or if it should have just stayed a standalone. I actually don't know if this is going to be like a book that has a sequel or not. This definitely should have been a standalone, and it didn't feel like it at the end. We're almost in the home stretch. Next book I read was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. I rated this 4.75. This series is so fun. And I really appreciate, once again, I'm going to talk about this, I really appreciate the way that the narrative is set up, where it's being written like an ethnography, and it's being written through diary entries. So you kind of know, like, if you get to a certain point in the writing, that this event has already happened. And so we're hearing about it after the fact, and it can be a mix of truth and also recollection bias, that you might not remember things the way that they happened. And this is really interesting because it can lend into the idea of an unreliable narration, even though that is not something that necessarily fits here, but still it kind of like lends into that idea if you wanted to go there. This universe is just so fun, and I really loved the main plot being Emily and company going to find a nexus, which a nexus being fairy doors that can go to different places. It's not like a fairy door that can go to one place. It's a nexus is a fairy door that leads to somewhere else with a fairy door to somewhere else that goes to a fairy door. And then it entered into this subplot with like 2 lost academics who are in love, and they're like constantly like misfiring and missing each other in fairy because they're in different times and also different like layers of reality, where the world around you is in multiple layers between like what you see and what is in fairy. So they were like constantly missing each other for like several decades. I thought that was very whimsical. Now, I rated this book 4.75 and not 5, and I would say that my only true complaint is sometimes Emily being extremely stubborn and impulsive does get a little bit grating, because she's just always like diving headfirst into danger. And of course, every chapter is something that's happening after the fact. It's her writing in her journal. It's all part of the ethnography. So it's like you come back to and you flip the page and you're hearing about things that already happened, and it would just keep happening at like the halfway mark and afterwards, where it was just constant conflict. It was just over and over and over and over, and it was all just at the crux, Emily diving into danger head first despite being told not to, and it all working out in the end. So to an extent, that was a little bit annoying. And honestly, I probably could lower this to a 4.5 instead of a 4.75, because it really does get pretty like, okay, like, girl, we get it. Because Emily's entire shtick is that she's like, I'll be okay if I dive into the world of fairy because I know fairy better than anybody. And then she proceeds to get herself into danger and then immediately proceeds to get herself out of it. So it's just like, sometimes the narrative feels a little easy, but it's still fun. And then I will talk about the last 2 books in rapid succession because they are a book 1 and a book 2 in a duology. I read A Love Most Fatal and A Love Most Brutal by Kath Richards. I stumbled upon this on Twitter because I was getting to a point where I had read a lot of fantasy most recently, because I'd say the only contemporaries I read before this, I read Deep End. But before that, I hadn't read a contemporary since May, and I was kind of losing my mind a little bit, even though I had already picked up the 3rd book in the Emily Wilde series, the Compendium of Lost Tales. I have that on my library loans right now. But I was caught between reading book 3 after I just read book 2 and taking a little bit of a break. I was kind of losing my mind a little bit. I haven't been reading a lot of contemporaries this year, so I decided to pick these up, mostly because I saw somebody reviewing the 2nd book on Twitter, and I was like, well, I can't just read the 2nd book in a contemporary, you have to start in book 1. I think what really got me about this duology, and I don't know if it's going to be a duology forever, I'm just going to talk about it that way, I think this is a very rare instance of a contemporary romance that just made me laugh, and like, I was fucking giggling, not because of the romance, but because these characters were legitimately funny. The series is also kind of girl bossy because it centers around this mafia family that is led by a woman, because their dad died and he had 3 daughters, and the first daughter went to law school, and so she was like the law expert, and she talked to all the judges and the cops and everything. She made sure everything was legal. And then the middle daughter was his heir, and then the younger daughter was the enforcer. So it was, you know, in one way this is kind of like girl bossy feminism mafia romance, which at first I was just like, let's, you know, see where this goes. And I really did enjoy it. It wasn't like super like millennial girl boss. So it wasn't like annoying in any way in that sense to me. And the first book follows the head of the family, so to speak. She's the middle daughter. Her name is Vanessa. Follows Vanessa and her nephew's math teacher. And they end up meeting because she ends up needing to go to a parent-teacher conference. In the very beginning of the story, he ends up asking her to go with him to a wedding. She goes, you know what? He's kind of cute in like a puppy dog way. So she goes to this wedding and they really hit it off. And as they're walking home, these assassins come out and nearly kill both of them. So Nate ends up becoming a target because Vanessa needs to get married. That's the whole thing, is that she needs to get married because the old heads in the community are kind of annoyed that they're being led by a woman. And if this woman was married to a man, they could pretend that the man was running the show. You see how I say this is kind of like girl bossy? Okay, so Nate ends up going under protection at her house. Nate ends up interviewing all of the candidates for her to get married to. And he even says, these guys suck. They're the worst. At the end of the day, I think that if this book was not funny, I would probably not have rated it as high as I did. Mostly, I think it's because the book is written in a way that I would think about a situation, or the character interactions would just felt so real to me. The hero has a lesbian best friend named Jenna, and Jenna comes in while Nate is like having a mental breakdown, and Jenna goes, oh my God, you're journaling. If you don't tell me what happened, I will call your mother. And then when Nate tells Jenna like, hey, there's a guy that's like keeping watch outside of my apartment to make sure I stay safe. He was the one who got the blood out of my shirt. He sits out there and makes sure nobody comes back. And Jenna just asks, is he nice? I don't know why that made me fucking giggle. It's just like, sometimes it's kind of awkward and unassuming. So the first book is about Vanessa and the math teacher, and of course they get together in the end. But the second book is about Vanessa's little sister, the enforcer. Her name is Mariana, or Mary, and her hero in question is the head of the Russian mafia. And he's like this 38-year-old man who has never been married, and things around are very tense because he doesn't have an heir and he's 38, and they thought that he would have had an heir by now. So the two of them are in this arrangement, and they tell you from the very beginning that the point is for them to get married and arrange to have children. So you know from the very start that there's going to be like pregnancy involved in here. And I'd like to potentially amend a previous annoyance that I have had with pregnancy being mentioned in books. I think it's just surprise pregnancy that bothers the fuck out of me. If it's told from the very beginning that either this is an arranged marriage and the whole point is to have a kid, or these are people who fall in love and like have children, and the surprise pregnancy is not like part of the book and it's not a trope, I think that's when it annoys me. When the second book was described to me as an arranged marriage with an age gap, yeah, I'm gonna read it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just a girl. And just to follow up on that statement, Maxim is 38 and Mary is 26. I think if she was any younger, it would have been a little bit weird, but I'm really not the person to be commenting on age gaps because I've been in one. Overall, it was just fun, and I did rate A Love Most Brutal 5 stars because really at the end of it, I was just like, what more could I ask for? What more could there have been to make it any more interesting? And I will say there was, and I'm going to try to end this video soon because I've been recording for an hour, but I'd say that one of the things that really stood out to me about this book, besides all of the romance, is the main climax of the book happens during a car chase. Because I've read too many, actually not that many, I've read a lot of mafia romances where it's like the final standoff takes place in an empty building and it's kind of like Die Hard style where they blow up the building in the end and somebody's tied to a chair. But the climax of this story took place during a car chase, which I found to be kind of refreshing. So at the end of the book, I'm confronted with this book series made me laugh. The couple is cute and endearing. I enjoy the story. I'm having a fun time. And then it does something different with the climax of the story than what I've seen previously. And I was like, yeah, I don't think there's really anything that I would change about the books. I was like, 5 stars. You've earned it. Okay, that's it. I've read 12 books in 4 months and I actually had a lot to talk about. As far as what I am reading right now, I am going to really get started on Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Next in the audiobooks, I have Blood of Elves on loan, and then I also have Out of the Woods. I'm kind of workshopping this idea for a video in which I read books that are very clearly titles that are Taylor Swift song references. And in the realm of Kindle Unlimited, I'm going to be reading The Witch's Blade next. And I started listening to The Familiar before I moved, but it has been a month since I picked it up and I only got to 18%, so I think I'm just gonna restart it from the beginning. Like I said, I have to read 15 more books in 2 months if I want to reach my reading goal, and I read 12 in 4 months. So we're really going to have to pick up the pace here. I'm really going to have to pull 2023 numbers if I really want to accomplish my goals here. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you got to the end of this video, if you'd like to find me anywhere else, you can most likely find me on Twitter. I haven't been streaming on Twitch as much recently. The next video I do will probably be telling you all of the books that I decluttered and donated before I moved and why, and probably diving more into why I don't really buy books in the first place anymore. Anyways, remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!